to video. Once again, we are in our narrative review series, and this time we are covering the Eldritch Fortress, which is from the book Ghal Maraz. This one took me, honestly, quite a while to do. I've already read through it twice, and I wanted to go through it again, and this book in particular it has been really difficult to kind of pare it down, right? Most of the other stories is pretty easy. There's like one or two conflicts here, there's like a very straight path that the story takes. There's one or two main characters to focus on, and that's about it. And this book is so different from that in that we have several of the different main characters kind of meeting up for the first time, and going on this together. And while Vandus does take the true, kind of center leading role, we have other characters like Ionis, like Thostus, that are important characters in their own right, that, I feel like need time devoted to them in the story and are important to the overarching story of Age of Sigmar. Thostus especially. He's looking like, he may not be Vandus yet in terms of his importance to the narrative, but he's not far behind. This is the second book that's really focused on him, from a chronological standpoint. And he has an entire short story series that's going to be 7 stories long, that the first one's already out and the rest are on the way. So Thostus is rapidly becoming a more and more central character to the Age of Sigmar. So I wanted to focus on him as well. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. I don't know how long this one will be. I'm trying, like I said, to pare this one down, but it could be rather long. So right out of the gate, this story begins where Storm of Blades left off. It's almost immediately afterwards. Now, Storm of Blades is from the book Warstorm, and if you read the entire book of Warstorm, you'll see that there's a story that focuses on Vandus, which takes place immediately after the Gates of Azir, which I've already covered that story, in which he fights Korgoth Kul for a second time. And then you have the first story of Thostus Bladestorm and their attempt within the realm of metal to find the Duardin, find the Silverway, and to establish contact with the dwarves and to begin to retake the realm of metal. They do not find the dwarves because the dwarves are not there. They find the Silverway and do retake that. And whenever they assault the Chaos Overlord of the area, Efrix, they are successful in foiling his plans and making him basically delay his grander scheme that no one really yet knows about. Delaying that, even though most of them die in the process, and Thostus himself has to be reforged. So this continues and kind of like takes those two stories and combines them together. So the story opens up with Vandus awakening, after he was saved by Sigmar from Korgoth Kul. If you remember, in that combat, Kul had bested him and was about to beat him whenever Vandus cries out to Sigmar, and Sigmar strikes him down with a lightning bolt and calls him up to Azir, similar to how he did the first time whenever he was still Vandal Blackfist, before he was a Stormcast. And this destroys the Realm Gate that Kul had. It destroys the Pyramid of Skulls that Kul had, that he was, basically using to mark his ascension to daemonhood. Basically, it just destroyed everything in that area and led to a very significant Stormcast victory over Kul, and really broke his power in that area. So he leaves the chamber that he finds himself in, and he goes into this very large meeting room where Sigmar and all these Stormcasts are. There's a very large number of Stormcasts here, and he sees Thostus Bladestorm already there, kneeling before Sigmar. And this literally picks up right at this point where Storm of Blades ended, because at the end of Storm of Blades, Thostus kind of awakens in this chamber, kneeling before Sigmar, and this immediately continues that. And Sigmar basically recounts to them that the real reason that he sent Thostus and the Celestial Vindicators to the Realm of Metal was, yes, to do what he had asked them to do, but also to locate Ghal Maraz, because he had his suspicions that Tzeentch was hiding Ghal Maraz there, which those suspicions have been confirmed. So he's sending the Hammers of Sigmar, the Celestial Vindicators, and a few other storm hosts to go and retake it. And Vandus and Thostus will basically be at the head of this crusade. And so they head off to do that. The story then cuts over to Kairos Fateweaver, who it's the first time that we've seen him in this kind of narrative line, and we discover that he is the lord over Efrix, who is this chaos sorcerer who has the Eldritch Fortress, in which the book is named for. And Kairos is Kairos is kind of just sitting back and watching Efrix try to gather the other kind of chaos, other underlings around himself. Like they're not Efrix's underlings, but they are other, servants of Tzeentch who are lords over smaller territories that surround this Eldritch Fortress. And Efrix is trying to gather them together to buy himself enough time to complete this ritual that he's attempting to enact, to take the entire realm of metal and Ghal Maraz into Tzeentch's realm, to forever be corrupted and owned by Tzeentch. Of course, none of these people know what he's planning, and he's basically just trying to get them to work together to fight off the Stormcast while they buy him time. And during this time, there's a Skaven warlord that comes to Kairos, basically asking for Kairos' help. And of course, Kairos, being the sneaky bird that he is, he agrees to help him in exchange for him doing Kairos basically a favor. And he says, I'm going to need you to come to the Realm of Metal and attack the Stormcast at a certain date and time and destroy them. And the Skaven says, sure, I'll do that. And Kairos, has the two heads, and one says the other, that won't be enough to destroy them. The other one says, I know, I don't really care. I'm just using this dumb Skaven to buy us enough time to be able to complete this ritual that we're aiming for. And so he sends the little Skaven on his way. And then we continue on with the Stormcast coming into the Realm of Metal. Vandus and Ionis are really the kind of central focus of the story for a long time, and really for the majority of this book. It focuses on them whenever it talks about the Stormcast more than any others. But they come into the the Realm of Metal, and they begin to march past where the Stormcast are currently holding towards this fortress, and they come to the outskirts of the city that the fortress is located, and they are attacked by some chaos forces. And there is a pretty significant combat here, because there's quite a few Stormcasts against a very large host of chaos. And during this fight, the only particularly important thing that happens is that the Silver Maiden, who is Solemnis, who was in the area before the Fall to Chaos. Basically, I'm not going to go into super in-depth here on her. I'll do another video sometime about her, but basically she lived in the time whenever the Realm of Metal fell to Chaos. And even though, all the soldiers were dead, and, the government was in shambles and all, and Chaos is literally like marching through the streets, conquering everything, she stood defiant against Chaos to the very end. And basically, she refused Efrix to become his wife, and so he had her killed. And her, ghost kind of returns at this point because of the conflict, and she summons up some of these silver blades that she had forged, and they're supposed to have been able to cut through anything, and which they can. They cut through the Sigmarite armor as well as Chaos armor as if it doesn't exist, and Ionis basically pleads with her and talks with her and convinces her that they're on her side, so she helps them, and they're able to defeat the Chaos forces there. And they continue on their way, with Ionis speaking with her as she kind of leads them to where they need to go, because as they approach the fortress teleports away. And so at first the Stormcast are like, we don't know where it went, but she knows, and so she leads them towards it. And they come to the Dragon Fate Dais, which is, the terrain piece that we see. And Vandus and a small group of his troops, and Thostus and a small group of his troops, as well as Ionis Cryptborn, and a few other lesser named Stormcast that we haven't seen before this story, and we really don't see afterwards in any of the books that are thus far out. They move ahead to try to call upon Dracothian, who is the father of all dragons, and who is the one that, if you're familiar with like the kind of transitional story between the old world and the Age of Sigmar, he's the one who taught Sigmar how to create the realms with the fragment of the old world. They go forward to speak with him on the Dragonfate dais, and they're attacked by the Skaven. This is the point in which the Skaven ambush that Kairos set up attacks. And Vandus is separated from everybody else, and, you know, basically the Skaven figure out that he's the leader, and so they're trying to kill him, specifically as Kairos requested. And Thostus kind of shows his transformation here and how powerful he has really become, and he gathers a small group of his men and just like cuts through all the Skaven, including, you know, the Skaven ogres and the I can't remember the ones with the Gatling guns, the Storm Fiends, and several other kinds of Skaven, just tears through them all as if they're nothing, and gets to Vandus, and that kind of, you know, helps shore everything up, and they are able to defeat the Skaven, and of course the Skaven flee once they start being routed, and Ionis kills quite a few of them with his, you know, his lightning, because Ionis is a pretty impressive wizard. And so anyways, they continue on after some casualties, and Kalanax, which is Vandus's mount, which is, you know, the model that we see in the starter box for the Lord Celestant, he speaks in his, you know, dragon language, calling upon Dracothian, and Dracothian, you know, appears before them and is talking with them, and then finally Vandus steps forward and basically asks for his help, because one of Dracothian's offspring, whose name is Argentine, is basically constantly heating this fall of silver, basically, you know, like a waterfall, right? It's constantly running because it's heated. And the Stormcast need this to cool so that they can climb it to get to where the Eldritch Fortress has gone. It's the only way they can get there. And so Dracothian basically says, you know, that this child of his has, you know, Argentine has not been obedient, and it's time for him to basically receive a rebuke, and so he agrees to help them. And he attacks Argentine, and these two dragons are so massive that this fight does not occur on this planet. It occurs out basically in the space around it in the stars. The Stormcast and the Chaos Forces can see this happening because these things are so massive. And so while this is going on, without him being there to constantly keep this, you know, silver falls heated so that they keep running, the Stormcast are able to climb the cooled one, and it takes them 4 days to reach the top. And finally, by the time they reach the top, Dracothian, being the older dragon, is driven off by his younger offspring Argentine, and not killed, just driven off. And so the metal begins to start to heat again, and the Stormcast are set upon by some Chaos Forces who are attempting to prevent them from getting to the fortification that the Eldritch Fortress has kind of appeared within. There was already a fortification up there known as the Crucible, but the Eldritch Fortress has just kind of like appeared where the keep would be in that. And so they fight, and the Stormcast are, you know, cutting their way through, and they look like they're about to make it. And Ionis gets killed by this massive Chaos Warrior who just comes up from behind him while Ionis is taking care of this horde of Chaos troops with his lightning ability, and crushes Ionis' head from behind. And it talks about this burst of lightning that's greater than any of the other Stormcasts that have been killed, just like shooting off and then returning to Azir, just to kind of demonstrate how powerful and how much of a presence Ionis really is. And, you know, this really upsets Vandus, and, you know, but his troops are able to kind of hold him back from running to where Ionis fell in, you know, in grief. And they are able to drive back the Chaos Forces and continue on, but there's a much smaller group. Whenever they were at the Dragonfate dais and they decided that they were going to ascend to continue after this fortress, only a small group of about, when I say a small group, compared to the total amount of Stormcasts that are there, a relatively smallish group of about 1,000 Stormcast decide to make the climb. And by this point, after losing some to the falls and losing some to literally falling off this, basically cliff of silver as they're climbing, and after the battle at the top, they're down to about 500 Stormcasts. And so they continue to press on, and they fight their way through a couple fortifications, and the Chaos Forces retreat easily enough because they're consolidating back to this Eldritch Fortress. And so the Stormcast get there, and we finally shift back to Efrix, who has called upon help of a old character that we are familiar with. Korgoth Kul has been summoned by Efrix and Kairos to basically succeed where the Chaos Warlord of this particular fortification, Thrawn, has failed. And Thrawn is not a particularly important character. He's one of these characters that appears for this story, but otherwise has never really shown up in any kind of significance. And Thrawn is, kind of had his ego hurt because, these guys basically have decided that he can't handle it and that they need to call upon some servants of the Blood God, which it's offensive to him that, number one, that they would do that instead of trusting him, and number two, that they would do that in his lands. And so, he's not happy that Kul's there even from the start, but he really can't do anything about it. And so, so he allows it, and the Stormcast are trying to push their way through to this fortress, but they're encountering a lot of resistance. Kairos has summoned quite a few of Tzeentch's forces from Tzeentch's realm, and they're really slowing down the Stormcasts. And finally, the Stormcasts are able to fight their way inside, but they are immediately attacked by Kul and his Khorne forces that have come with him. And basically, they get worn down to where the only ones left are Thostis Bladestorm and Vandus. And basically, no one can hurt Thostis. He has been transformed by his, initial conflict whenever he was hit by the Mutalith Vortex Beast or whatever it's called with its transmogrifying ray, and then by Sigmar kind of like cleansing him of that. He's literally become like so powerful, like defensively. He's basically, the ultimate tank. Like none of those weapons, except for maybe Kul's axe, can even hurt him. And so he's just casting down guys right and left, and Kul is basically like Vandus's mind because, Kul is still stuck on his vengeance. And right whenever he's about to kill Vandus, because so basically Vandus has been knocked to the ground and Kul is getting ready to kill him whenever Thrawn steps in and blocks the blow, and it's basically like, his ego is flared back up. He's like, how dare you try to kill the leader of this attacking force? This is my land. Blah, blah, blah. I'm in charge. And so Kul is like, you get out of my way. You will not deny me this. And so they begin to fight, and none of Kul's forces are willing to attack Thostis and Vandus because Kul basically claimed them as kills for himself. And so Kul's forces and Thrawn's forces begin to fight each other because, of course, that's what happens whenever you get, servants of two different Chaos Gods together. It's bad enough whenever you have the servants from one Chaos God together, they'll fight. But when you have two different ones, of course there's going to be fighting. So basically they ignore the few Stormcasts that are left and begin fighting each other. And so Thostis and Vandus continue on. And they basically come to this point where they're like about to be set upon by some Tzeentch forces from Tzeentch's realm. And all of a sudden a lightning bolt comes down and strikes them and kills some of these forces, and they see Ionis and some of the Stormcasts that had already fallen already reforged and brought back into battle, and Ionis basically lets forth this lightning that just obliterates everyone that's blocking the way and opens up the way. And Ionis turns to Vandus, and Vandus is like, how are you back so soon? Normally reforging takes so long. And Ionis is like, I told you already, death has no hold over me because I am already of death. And so they continue on, and they come to this central chamber where Efrix and Kairos are. And Kairos has gathered 8 other Lords of Change to put about this ritual that will, literally like destroy this part of the realm of metal and take it into Tzeentch's realm. They've had to kind of scale down their plan because the Stormcasts have gotten there too quickly, so they can't take the entire realm of metal, but they're going to literally rip this large fragment from the realm of metal and take it into Tzeentch's realm forever. And there's this, weird mechanical device that they're using this for, and Efrix has been tasked with the duty of operating this machine, which is literally like killing him as he's doing it. He has aged significantly and weakened during the process. He's basically, just an old man who can do nothing at this point. And so the Stormcast attack, and they kill a couple of these, Lords of Change, and of course Ionis, being as powerful as he is, takes out about 2 or 3 of them by himself, and some of the Celestial Vindicators kill a few, and Thostis kills 1 or 2, and Vandus kills 1, and so it's like, you just see them dropping here or there, and finally Kairos has kind of had enough of this, and he starts taking out a bunch of the Stormcast, because it's not like it's a one-sided fight, like the Lords of Change are killing Stormcast as this is going on, and it gets to the point to where, a lot of the Stormcast have died and most Lords of Change are gone, and Thostis and Vandus charge to try to, break Ghal Maraz free of where it is, and I just lost the name in my head. Kairos uses, this fire and basically pins down Ionis, and it's not Ionis, I'm sorry, Thostis, and begins to, slowly melt him. The heat is so great, which this is finally something that can hurt him. And even at that, it's more of a slow killing of him, and this fire for everything else basically just annihilated it in an instant. And, so he's pinned down on the ground, badly hurt, and Vandus is rushing to try to finish breaking Ghal Maraz free, and Kairos turns to blast him, but before he can do it, all of a sudden he's hit by this massive blast of lightning, and Ionis kind of steps forward and engages him in this wizard duel and keeps him busy. And so Vandus is breaking the last bits of the chains that are holding Ghal Maraz in place, and Efrix, who is, kind of lying there on the ground in this whole point because, he's so old and weak and has been knocked down by all this combat, picks up one of the staffs from one of the Lords of Change and strikes Kairos in the back with it, because he decides that he hates Kairos more than he hates the Stormcast, because Kairos has always been mocking him, belittling him. He's forced him to do this ritual that's basically killed him, and he's basically robbed him of his future of being one of Tzeentch's potentially greatest servants. And this wounds Kairos and buys the Stormcast more time, so that Vandus is able to finish breaking free Ghal Maraz, and Ionis and Kalanax kind of hold off all the forces while Vandus approaches Kairos, who's finally kind of recovering himself, and before Kairos can do anything, Vandus, kind of guided by Ghal Maraz, strikes Kairos repeatedly and crushes him and just destroys him, and Kairos just becomes this little crystal of everything that he was, just turns into this little crystal, and then Vandus just stomps it out, and all of a sudden this lightning bursts out from Ghal Maraz and just wipes out all the chaos forces nearby, and helps kind of close the portal to Tzeentch's realm that was opening, and kind of saves the day. And then the story ends with the Sigmar, which is, you'll sometimes hear people refer to it jokingly as Space Station Sigmar, appears in the sky and begins to return the Stormcast to it with Ghal Maraz, because Sigmar has come to reclaim what is his. So that's the end of this story. Obviously a lot happens. This has not been a really short review by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot happens. There's a lot of characters to keep up with. And it's a pretty significant story in terms of the overall narrative of the Age of Sigmar kind of progressing. But with that being said, until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.